with the violence top of mind for many Americans right now, parents are struggling with how to talk to their children about what they are seeing and hearing. For some more advice on how parents can discuss the conflict with kids, we're joined by Jamie Howard, a senior clinical psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. Jamie, good morning. You've seen the images. How do we even begin to have that conversation with our children, and what is the right age to even bring it up?
Right, I think around 10 or so, our younger children should just be protected and shielded from this. This is too much for their development to make sense of. And then when we do talk to kids, we want to start with open-ended questions, right? So with our, say, elementary age kids, something like, what have you been hearing about what's going on in the world? And then go from there. They may or may not be hearing a lot about it, but we want to be available to answer their questions. It's always better for kids to hear about disturbing news from trusted adults.
If they say they're not hearing about it, should you go into it anyway in the anticipation that they will eventually?
I think what you want to do is you want to start small, right? You don't have to get into a lot of details, but you can say, well, there has been a conflict overseas and there's another war going on and you're safe. And if you hear anything about it, please come talk to me. You can always come talk to me if you feel confused or have questions about it.
Now, how does that conversation change when you're talking to someone older, like a teenager?
Like teenagers, exactly. So they do know about it because they're on social media and they're just aware and they're thinking about these things. That's the nature of a teenager. They start to think in more complex ways. So I would be more pointed with them and say, what do you think about what's going on in Israel and between Israel and Hamas? How do you feel about it? Tell me what you guys are talking about.
What about the social media impact? Because 10 to 16, 18, I mean, a lot of children have phones. We've seen the images again, and as a news organization, we have to be so careful about, you know, making sure that it is from that region and what we're seeing is authentic.
Information out there.
Absolutely, we have to authenticate it. So what do we tell the kids when they come back and say, have you seen this, Mom or Dad?
These images
You're lucky if they do that.
Right. Yes, if they come to you. That's what we want. That's why we want you to open up this conversation. So they do come to you. We don't want kids seeing these images. We actually don't even need most grown-ups to see these images. When we have human-to-human violence or assault, we know from the trauma research that this is particularly hard for people to make sense of and to cope with. It's particularly traumatic. So those images from the initial terrorist attack are really hard for kids. The teenagers I'm working with are telling me it's hard to stop looking, but it's just these images are in my head when I'm trying to pay attention in school. They're in my head when I'm trying to sleep at night. Teenagers already don't get enough sleep. So I would really try to take off social media for at least a few days to get through this initial phase where there's so much imagery out there.
It makes you long for our 80s childhood where you were watching some things that were tough, but you were watching it on a single screen in the living room and you could engage with it. But those days are gone. Speaking of not knowing, some kids are going to have complex questions, particularly older kids who's right in this situation, who's wrong in this situation, why is this happening? And, you know, unless you've got a PhD, sometimes the answer is, I really don't know, for a lot of people. Is it okay to say that?
It's definitely okay to say that. What we want to do is facilitate trust and an open conversation. But if you say to your kids, listen, that's a big question that I actually don't know the answer to, but why don't we look into it together? Why don't we gain more knowledge on this topic and come back? I'll do some of my research. Let's meet again on Tuesday. Just set a date and then make sure you do follow up so they trust you.
I know you're here to talk about kids, but what's your advice to the adults?
To the adults. So a lot of the adults I've been working with this week, we're talking about focusing on your behavior. So take action in ways that you are able to, if that means making a donation or peaceful advocacy. But also it doesn't help the situation, even if you might feel guilty, it doesn't help for you to not be functioning. So what we want is for our behavior to be our anchor. I get up, I eat breakfast, I go to work or I go to school. I'm kind to my family and friends. And this is actually what we can focus on and what we can do during these hard times.
Put on your oxygen mask before you put it on your child.
Yes, exactly.
Like in the plane.
You got it.
Yeah, that's right. Jamie Howard, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.